So I just want to welcome everyone to this. Really, it's a special edition of my 10 questions. 10 Qs is one of my content features on things I said, things I wrote down. And today it's a things I said out loud feature. I interview people that inspire me. And for the first ever things I wrote down poetry contest, I've been interviewing the judges who will be selecting the winning poems. And this week, I'm asking 10 questions of a best-selling author, of a independent filmmaker, a true talent, and he just happens to be my younger brother, Daniel Kooman, with whom I founded a studio alongside Matt Kooman called Unveil, and he is in the midst of one of his biggest creative adventures yet. So Dan, I just want to say it's so good to have you. Welcome to my Substack.
Yeah, well, super good, and I love everything you just said, especially the brother part.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Okay, so this, like I said, this is kind of new. If you're a literalist, this might not be 10 Qs because I might pepper in some other questions with Dan. But before we jump in, I just want to read his bio because it's so impressive. And I want everyone who submits to this contest to really get a sense of the quality of the judges who will be reading your work and selecting winners. Daniel's just among them. And so this is his bio. I don't want to embarrass you, but hey, it's public knowledge. Daniel Kooman is an award-winning film producer who has traveled to more than 30 countries to tell stories that change and inspire. His work has been featured on platforms such as HuffPo, the BBC, Newswire, ABC, and many international, national, local podcasts, journals, magazines, newspapers, too many places to count. Storytelling has become a platform for Dan and his wife, Christy, to invest in children, empowering orphans in Tanzania, and restoring hope to young women trafficked in Thailand. He produces films for Unveil Studios alongside his brothers, Matthew, and myself, Andrew. And he's the director of the feature film She Has a Name, which is on Amazon Prime. He's the director of the documentary series Dream, Find Your Significance, also on Amazon, on Christian Cinema, and of Breath of Life, which is based on his best-selling book, Breath of Life. You can also find all those films that I just mentioned on Unveil TV, our niche streaming platform. Go check it out. Daniel and his wife, Christy, live on Vancouver Island with their daughter, Rosie, who's so sweet, and Judah, their son. Dan, it's so good to have you. And I'm just going to jump right into these 10 questions. Okay. You have said yes to be a judge of this poetry contest that I'm running for subscribers. Subscribers can submit for free. So two-part question. Why did you say yes, and do you regret it?
Well, I'm only not regretting it because I get to be with my brother, and no, it is actually a privilege to be able to kind of interact with people's creativity. That's been one of the passions of us at Unveil Studios, yourself, Matt, and I. And it's like we really thrive when, and we've known that we thrive when our creativity is being tested and tried and actually put out to the world. And it is a leap of faith to be a creative because you're sharing something with others. And there's always that possibility that it will be loved or hated or judged, or in this case, literally judged, but by a panel of people that are actually quite compassionate and care about the work. So I think that I do not regret it. I really think that these are valuable creative pursuits that people should really jump into.
I've been asking each of the judges of the contest something like, when was the first time that you were aware of poetry, or do you have a memory of writing your first poem? Just was interested to hear from you, what stands out to you as like the first creative work of significance in your journey that you were part of creating?
That's a really great question. And the first two things that come to mind, one is doing book reports on video. How many remember the shoulder cams with the full VHS that you put an actual VHS into? Those were beautiful because the format you recorded on, you popped into the VCR and you didn't have to capture the footage and you didn't even have to digitize or anything. But that was in grade 5, so I was 11. And it was a book report on a Sigmund Bauer book. And this is a full circle moment because Sigmund Bauer, who was my favorite author growing up, wrote the foreword to my book, Breath of Life. And that was actually like such a cool picture of creativity coming full circle. Because when I was in grade 5 doing that book report, he came to our classroom in Red Deer, Alberta, at the Red Deer Christian School, and shared about the impact and influence of writing and of doing creativity, because you never know how far it will reach. And that, I would have been around 11 years old. That message obviously grabbed my heart because all those years later, not only was he still on my mind and I wanted him to be a part of the project I was creating, but it inspired to write and to, get actually out there and create. So yeah, it's pretty cool how those things come full circle. The other one was when I was in grade 7 or 8, there was one of those kind of like scam poetry contests where they actually do it just to like print a book and then
Right.
you submit with a fee. And I think that I was even aware, like, this is like totally just like a money grab by this publisher. But the funny thing is, as much as that was an interesting venture and didn't necessarily seem like it would upfront have any sort of fruit attached to it, that in some ways encouraged me to become a writer. And so even if it's a small and unlikely attempt or seed or venture, I think that creativity always has actually a payoff.
Love it. It's so neat to meet the people that you look up to. Like the Accidental Detectives, and we all must have read them as kids. I love those books too. And Sigmund Bauer, I think, has inspired a lot of people. I think also Marcia Laycock, one of the other judges, mentions Sigmund Bauer as someone that she really admires, which is cool. Okay, how have you kind of mentioned about how contests and festivals, these creative outlets, factored into your creative journey? You mentioned kind of maybe prompting you to write and to consider yourself a writer. How else, like with film, how have festivals, contests, how have they supported your creative journey?
Well, film festivals have been a big part of Unveil Studio's story. We early on, we did a film called E for Everyone. It was kind of our film school. We went to Kenya, India, Thailand, and Malaysia. You were there, Matt, myself, and 3 of our friends. And basically, getting it into film festivals was the only way that we could find an audience to be first-time filmmakers. And it got into probably half a dozen film festivals, and then we premiered it at the Red Deer College Arts Center to, I think we had 1,600 people that saw it over points. And it was a huge independent film premiere success. And the interesting thing with that is it's like your community might be, as much as you can be a prophet without honor in your hometown, as the saying goes, there's also this element of your community might be your biggest backers, and they might be the people that come around and they're like, no, like, keep going. This is something you're actually good at. And we had that happen along our journey. And I think that, so that happened locally, but it also happened internationally. And the other side of that coin is that when you get recognition from some festival in New York City or something in Pennsylvania, or these different things that we did as we submitted different films to festivals, and then we would win awards. You know, we won best film at international festivals in different parts of the world, from Europe to the US. And that was, She Has a Name and other projects. Dream won best, best series, best director, and things like that. And when you get that recognition from those outside sources, that is very validating, because it's like, okay, these are people that we don't know. They're not our community. They don't have to kind of pat our back and say, keep going. But these are basically people reflecting on your work from a fresh vantage point. And they're saying, this is something worth doing. So you don't have to get that to keep going. I'm not saying you have to be recognized to keep going. But if you are putting yourself out there, what I'm saying is, if you're doing things with excellence, people will recognize that, and you will get that feedback, and that can really kind of keep you encouraged to keep going.
What's your favorite type of writing to read? Like, do you read poetry at all? Like, where are you reading poetry these days?
Well, funny enough, I read a lot of poetry, and that poetry is probably 99% of which is in the Bible. And it's one of the most inspiring poetic pieces of literature. I mean, it's the most inspiring because it's read more than any other poetry in the world ever created. And it's always the bestseller. The Bible is the bestseller every year worldwide, and printed like millions times more than any other book. And I think that speaks to the validity and the power of its poetry, because when you go to the book of Isaiah, I've been reading the book of Jonah, you go to the book of Psalms, there's literally poetry. There's poetry in Exodus. I was just doing some writing on my own Substack newsletter just about the Song of Miriam, the Song of Moses. Like, some of the most epic moments in world history were captured in poetry and live on through the Bible and through other sources of literature. So for me, that's always been the inspire. I think that the way that the psalmist David writes, and the way that some of even Solomon's kind of words kind of are poetic, I think those really influence me in my writing and in my desire to put words together in a way that not merely sounds good or is formatted well, but actually has purpose and has meaning behind it. And there's no better place to find that purpose than the Word of God, in my opinion.
That's a good word. We're both pretty high output creative individuals. Your weekly article on your Substack, which you just mentioned, Daniel Kooman Breath of Life. You can search that on Substack and find it. It's my go-to Monday morning read. So I get up at 5:07 a.m. every morning, and I have the coffee on. By 5:20, I'm reading Your Monday Morning, and it's like a devotion almost for me. It's so good. What are you writing about right now, and how did your latest series come to life?
So right now I'm writing a book that is being released in chapter format on Substack. It's called Women of the God Who Hides. So there was a book last year that was called The God Who Hides, and it comes from a chapter in Isaiah 45. It says, surely you are a God who hides himself. And I was having this conversation with someone yesterday. It's like, why isn't it more obvious? It's like, well, it is obvious when you see it, but it's like God is actually hiding on purpose, because there's something about the mystery of a human being pursuing the sort of unknown and the mystery of God that actually allows us to be a part of the adventure of knowing God. And if he was just projecting in 3 dimensions and 4 dimensions at all times everywhere, it would be not your own will that would be encountering God. It would be just some sort of like, I don't know, slave follower kind of a thing. But he actually wants relationship. And so he actually is hiding himself. And you see this theme all throughout scripture. And so looking at these inspiring stories from scripture, to me, it's inspiring because it's like, these are stories that survived 3, 4, 5,000 years. And so there's something to them. If we're still talking about them, there's something about those stories that matters. And so it's like taking figures, like in the case of chapters I'm working on, like Moses' mother, Yochebed, and Miriam, who was, Yochebed had 3 kids that we know of. Aaron, the priest, like the creator of the priesthood of the Jewish history, and Moses, who's like the most famous biblical character besides Jesus, and then Miriam. And so it's like these kind of figures are so inspiring to look at, and like, what can we learn from them? And how is God in his hiddenness revealed to these people that had faith back in the day, and how does that apply to us now? So that's kind of what I'm working on right
And I just highly recommend, if you haven't, I'll leave the link to your Substack here in this post or in the show notes. Go check it out. It's like weekly encouragement. Dan has such incredible insights. It blows your mind. I just so appreciate how you like so faithfully spend time in the Word and like bring that to life for people. It's pretty exciting. Which kind of leads me to my next question. You wrote and are gearing up to direct a new biblical epic for theaters across the world. It's going to be hit cinemas, and it's going to be a story that's going to touch millions. It recently became one of the most successful crowd-funded faith-based films of all time, which must feel totally amazing from where you're sitting, because it wasn't always a surety that would happen. So tell us a little bit, in the last few minutes that we have together, a little bit about Daniel, the film that you're creating, and what you want to say about it.
Yeah, well, it is as we describe it in the synopsis. It's a true story about overcoming the impossible. And reflecting on the book of Daniel, I don't know if people watching have read it. You've probably heard about Daniel's encounter in the lion's den. You might have heard about these 3 guys that were thrown into a fiery furnace, and 4th man appeared in the flames, and they were untouched by the flames. The only thing that burned off of them were the ropes that were holding their arms bound. These are true stories, and they are about overcoming impossible difficulties that just represent these amazing kind of, I think, absolutely like universal stories of what faith can do if your faith is in God. And it's a super powerful thing, because in the kingdom of Babylon, that's the setting of the movie. It was like the max peak golden kingdom, glorious, like it was earth at its absolute peak. And yet it was never enough to bring God or to bring a connection that was lifelong and eternal. And I think in that story, we have these they're literally little kids, like they were boys, they were teenagers that are sent from Jerusalem and exile into Babylon. And they show kings and rulers and these amazing golden kingdom people like King Nebuchadnezzar. They show them what it actually is to be someone that is royal and someone that is walking in a way that is it is eternal, because we're gonna always have these stories, like the faith of Daniel in the den and the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the furnace. And so it's kind of like the whole premise is like fire can actually refine, and you can be forged into something like gold if you go into the fire. And that is probably a really good tie-in to this poetry contest in a nuanced way, is like, and to your point about how just this crowdfund, is the second biggest faith independent film crowdfund, which is actually tremendous in the sense that like we weren't even going to do it. So it's like we were thinking, what if? And literally the same reason why someone might not submit a poem is like, well, what if it's not well received, or what if it actually falls flat, or what if it fails? And I think that that may be the same thing that I respect about your work, Andrew, and about like what Unveil has kind of, in a nuanced way, overcome over time, because we've lasted somehow 20 years as an independent film studio, and that basically doesn't really happen. And it's because you take that next leap of faith and you're like, oh, it would have been nice to be comfortable here because now it feels like we're sort of semi-established, but then you just risk it all again. And then you jump back into the furnace, you know? And I think that that is actually the story of humanity and the story of faith. And when you take that kind of a faith of like, hey, I'm going to leap here, I'm going to take that jump, and then you add the God component of like, God will show up and he doesn't have to. And that's what they actually say in the book of Daniel. Even if he doesn't, we're still going to be faithful. And so that's really what we do as creatives is we say, you know what? I'm putting my best foot forward. I'm going to throw this thing. It might even be into the furnace. It might even burn. No, but maybe God will show up, and maybe my own creative journey will be inspired in a new way. And maybe I'll meet somebody that I didn't even know I would connect with, and they'll be like my best friend or my best creative partner or my best like encouragement moving forward. You just never know what's going to come out of it. And it doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't have to be success and any of those things. Like we've found our greatest connections just through the relationships built along the way. And so I think that, yeah, it's worth taking the leap.
So good. Thanks, Dan, so much. I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Hope we can do this again, but I hope my audience just gets a sense of the absolute depth of your character and the encouragement that you bring. So please make sure that you check out all his work. Your cup will be filled to overflowing when you connect with it. And I don't just say that as your brother, which I'm so grateful to be, but also as a reader of your work and admirer of the content that you create. Such a pleasure. Let's do this again. But thanks for spending some time with us on things I said out loud and on my platform, things I wrote down. Till we see each other again here.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew.